Hi, my name's Isaac Shutt. I'm an estate planning attorney. I'm licensed both in Texas and in Wyoming. And today I'm going to talk about how to use an irrevocable trust for asset protection in Texas. First, I'll talk about what is an irrevocable trust for asset protection. Then I'll talk about the pros of using an irrevocable trust for asset protection versus the cons of doing that. And then I'll also talk about how to make it all work. So first, what is an irrevocable trust for asset protection? Well, just like every kind of trust, a trust is actually not a document. It's a legal relationship that's governed by a trust document that's prepared by an attorney like me. So it will lay out several roles and responsibilities. You have the beneficiary of the trust, you have the trustee of the trust who manages the assets for the benefit of the beneficiary, and then you also have the settlor or grantor or trustor of the trust. And that last settlor, grantor, trustor, that's the person who initially established the trust. So in this case, that's you. So that's what an irrevocable trust is. You basically take your assets or some of your assets and take them out of your name and put them in your trust. So what that means then is if you get sued, you could say, those assets aren't mine. I can't give you what I don't have. So that's how an irrevocable trust, we use the analogy of taking those assets out of your name and putting them off on a liability island that the sharks can't get at. So it's taking it out of your name, putting it in a totally protected asset over there. And I'll get to in a minute that it has to be done correctly. If you don't do your irrevocable trust correctly and follow all these rules, you may not get that asset protection. So this is probably not a DIY type solution where you can use Google or your favorite internet search to find a form and think that you're going to be protected. This is probably a situation where you need to go to an attorney and talk to that attorney about creating an irrevocable trust for asset protection, because it has to be done very carefully by an attorney that knows what she or he is doing. Okay, so let's talk about the pros of using an irrevocable trust for asset protection. Well, the biggest thing is that you get asset protection, and that's really nice because let's say you are involved in a lawsuit because you maimed somebody in a car wreck or something like that. Whatever's off sitting in that liability island is protected from whoever might try to sue you for that car wreck. And this is the kind of stuff that happens. And you might think, well, yeah, Isaac, but I have car insurance. Isn't that where my car insurance picks up? And the answer is yes, absolutely. You should have car insurance if you're driving around. And if you create a car wreck, that liability insurance should come to your defense. But that's only going to cover so much. You have limited payout on that policy. And so if whoever's suing you says that's not enough, and they know that you have some deep pockets and they'd rather get more money than what your policy would pay, then guess what? They're going to try to get into those deep pockets. And that's where asset protection becomes so important. And obviously people who work in a career that has higher liability, whether that's some sort of professional, doctor, lawyer, any of those kinds of things. A lot of those people will have irrevocable trust as well, pilots. All of those are clients of ours who really like irrevocable trust. So it's not necessarily just a car wreck. Any type of lawsuit that you might face, you might be interested in asset protection to get those things out of your name so that if you get sued, those are not up for grabs. So that's obviously the number one pro. But there are some other kind of nice perks to have an irrevocable trust. One is that whatever assets you put into your irrevocable trust will avoid probate when you pass away. So whatever that irrevocable trust document states in terms of who gets what when you die, that will happen without going through a probate court, without having attorneys or things like that. It's just set it and forget it, and that's the way that'll go. So that's really nice there. I'll be honest. I would say the majority of the people who come to my office to meet with me about creating an irrevocable trust actually leave my office without creating that irrevocable trust. Because sometimes the cons of having an irrevocable trust are not worth it. They decide that the juice is not worth the squeeze. They're not interested in the pain that having an irrevocable trust would create in their lives. So let's talk a little bit about what that pain would be, and then maybe that helps you decide if an irrevocable trust is still something that might be of interest to you. Okay, so the number one con is kind of in the name of this. It's irrevocable. And what that means is you can't change it. So that trust document is set. Now, there are certain things that we can do to modify an irrevocable or unamendable trust document using things like trust protectors and other things like that I don't have time for in this video. But by and large, an irrevocable trust is irrevocable. So if you have certain beneficiaries laid out in that document and then you want to change your mind, that's not as easy to do as if the assets were just straight up in your name, because the trust document itself is unchangeable. So that's probably the biggest con where people say, yeah, not interested in an irrevocable trust. Another con is that typically when we set up an irrevocable trust, we'll recommend that our client is not the trustee. So what that means is you wouldn't be in charge of managing those assets. So you have to have somebody that you really trust to manage those assets for your benefit. And a lot of people, again, when they come to meet with us and they say, wait a minute, you don't recommend that I'm the trustee of my own trust? And we say, well, not for an irrevocable asset protection standpoint. We would rather you have some third party be that trustee. And then that creates problems because a lot of times people say, I don't have anybody that I trust to be that trustee, especially if it's an irrevocable trust. I don't have anybody that I trust in that role. So that can be a deal breaker. And then also we have some issues surrounding taxation. Now, irrevocable trusts are taxed a little bit differently than revocable trusts, or obviously just trusts that are in your name. And so again, that's beyond the scope of this video, but I just want to say that before you go whole hog and put all your assets into an irrevocable trust, you need to look at how that might impact income tax in particular on the assets that are in that trust. And I also say that one of the problems with having an irrevocable trust, just as a last con, is that they're very technical and there are a lot of rules that we need to follow. It's not just a basic revocable living trust where it's kind of like, whatever. An irrevocable trust, to make it have that asset protection, really has to be done correctly, and all the rules have to be followed, not only in the creation, but in the operation of that trust. So with that, that's a really nice segue into how do I make an irrevocable trust, and how do I make an irrevocable trust that will give me that asset protection? Okay, well, I already said it earlier in this video, and I think it's worth repeating that you probably should have an attorney create the irrevocable trust document. So that's kind of your step one. Go meet with an attorney who's prepared irrevocable trusts and has some experience with those. And then number two, once you have that trust document established, you have to put the assets into it. So you need to decide what assets you're comfortable with transferring into that irrevocable trust, and then you need to transfer those assets into the trust, which we call funding the trust. Now, a lot of our clients will hire us to help fund that trust, but if you want to try to do that on your own and transfer the assets into the trust on your own, you can do that. But that's a very important step that people sometimes miss. They pay a lot of money to an attorney to create that irrevocable trust document, but there's no asset protection if you never funded those assets into the trust you just created. So that's a very important step. Now from there, you've got your operational issues. And again, I said it before that we recommend that the client not serve as a trustee and they have a third party who serves as a trustee. And what that means then is that you're trusting somebody else to follow those rules to make sure you get the asset protection. So they need to follow the rules that are listed in the trust document. They need to follow the rules of the law, and they need to follow the rules that the estate planning attorney lays out for that. I hope you found this video helpful. My name's Isaac Shutt. I'm an estate planning attorney licensed in Texas and in Wyoming.